The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. Chapter 1. Nobody came to my 7th birthday party. There was a table laid with jellies and trifles, with a party hat beside each place, and a birthday cake with 7 candles on it in the center of the table. The cake had a book drawn on it in icing. My mother, who had organized the party, told me that the lady at the bakery said that she had never put a book on a birthday cake before, and that mostly for boys it was footballs or spaceships. I was their first book. When it became obvious that nobody was coming, my mother lit the 7 candles on the cake, and I blew them out. I ate a slice of the cake, as did my sister and one of her friends, both of them attending the party as observers, not participants, before they fled, giggling to the garden. Party games had been prepared by my mother, but because nobody was there, not even my sister, none of the party games were played, and I unwrapped the newspaper around the past the parcel gift myself, revealing a blue plastic Batman figure. I was sad that nobody had come to my party, but happy that I had a Batman figure, and there was a birthday present waiting to be read, a box set of the Narnia books, which I took upstairs. I lay on the bed and lost myself in the stores. I liked that. Books were safer than other people anyway. My parents had also given me a Best of Gilbert and Sullivan LP to add to the 2 that I already had. I'd loved Gilbert and Sullivan since I was 3, when my father's youngest sister, my aunt, took me to see Iolanthe, a play filled with lords and fairies. I found the existence and nature of the fairies easier to understand than that of the lords. My aunt had died soon after, of pneumonia, in the hospital. That evening my father arrived home from work, and he brought a cardboard box with him. In the cardboard box was a soft-haired black kitten of uncertain gender, whom I immediately named Fluffy, from which I loved utterly and wholeheartedly. Fluffy slept on my bed at night. I talked to it, sometimes, when my little sister was not around, half expecting to answer in a human tongue. It never did, and I did not mind. The kitten was affectionate and interested and a good companion for someone whose 7th birthday party had consisted of a table with iced biscuits and a blancmange and cake and 15 empty folding chairs. I do not remember ever asking any of the other children in my class at school why they had not come to my party. I did not need to ask them. They were not my friends, after all. They were just the people I went to school with. I made friends slowly, when I made them. I had books, and now I had my kitten. He would be like Dick Whittington and his cat. I knew, or if Fluffy proved particularly intelligent, we would be the miller's son in Puss in Boots. The kitten slept on my pillow, and even waited for me to come home from school, sitting on the driveway in front of my house, by the fence, until, a month later, it was run over by the taxi that brought the opal miner to stay in my house. I was not there when it happened. I got home from school that day, and my kitten was not waiting to meet me. In the kitchen was a tall, rangy man with tan skin and a checked shirt. He was drinking coffee at the kitchen table. I could smell it. In those days, all coffee was instant coffee, a bitter, dark brown powder that came out of a jar. I'm afraid I had a little accident arriving here, he told me, cheerfully. But not to worry. His accent was clipped, unfamiliar. It was the first South African accent I had heard. He, too, had a cardboard box on the table in front of him. The black kitten, was he yours? He asked. It's called Fluffy, I said. Yeah. Like I said, accident coming here. Not to worry. Dispose of the corpse. Don't have to trouble yourself. Dealt with the matter. Open the box. What? He pointed to the box. Open it, he said. The open miner was a tall man. He wore jeans and check shirts every time I saw him, except the last. He had a thick chain of pale gold around his neck that was gone the last time I saw him too. I did not want to open this box. I wanted to go off on my own. I wanted to cry for my kitten, but I could not do that if anyone else was there and watching me. I wanted to mourn. I wanted to bury my friend at the bottom of the garden, past the green grass fairy ring, into the rhododendron bush cave, back past the heap of grass cuttings where nobody ever went but me. The box moved. I bought it for you, said the man. Always pay my debts. I reached out, lifted the top flap of the box, wondering if this was a joke, if my kitten would be in there. Instead, a ginger face stared up at me truculently. The opal miner took the cat out of the box. He was a huge ginger-striped tomcat, missing half an ear. He glared at me angrily. This cat had not liked being put in a box. He was not used to boxes. I reached out to stroke his head, feeling unfaithful to the memory of my kitten. But he pulled back so I could not touch him, and he hissed at me, then stalked off to a far corner of the room where he sat and looked and hated. There you go. Cat for a cat, said the opal miner, and he roughed my hair with his leathery hand. Then he went out into the hall, leaving me in the kitchen with the cat that was not my kitten. The man put his head back through the door. He's called Monster, he said. It felt like a bad joke. I propped open the kitchen door so the cat could go out. Then I went up to my bedroom and lay on my bed and cried for dead Fluffy. When my parents got home that evening, I do not think my kitten was even mentioned. Monster lived with us for a week or more. I put cat food in a bowl for him in the morning and again at night, as I had for my kitten. He would sit on the back door until I or someone else let him out. We saw him in the garden, slipping from bush to bush, or in trees, or in the undergrowth. He would trace his movements, the dead blue tints and thrushes he would find in the garden, but we rarely saw him. I miss Fluffy. I knew you could not simply replace something alive, but I dare not grumble to my parents about it. They would have been baffled at my upset, after all. If my kitten had been killed, it had also been replaced. The damage had been made up. It all came back. Even as it came back, I knew it would not be for long. All the things I remembered, sitting on the green bench beside the little pond that Letty Hempstock had once convinced me was an ocean. Chapter 2. I was not happy as a child, although from time to time I was content. I lived in books, more than I lived anywhere else. Our house was large and many-roomed, which was a good when we bought it, and my father had money, but not good later. My parents called me into their bedroom one afternoon, very formally. I thought I must have done something wrong, and was therefore telling off, but no. They told me only they were no longer affluent, that I would need to make sacrifices, and that what I would be sacrificing was my bedroom, the little room at the top of the stairs. I was sad. My bedroom had a tiny little yellow wash basin that I put in for me, just my size. The room was above the kitchen and immediately up the stairs from the television room. So at night, I could hear the comforting buzz of adult conversation coming from below, through my half-open door, and I did not feel alone. Also in my bedroom, nobody minded if I kept the hall door half open, allowing in enough light that I was not scared of the dark, and just as important, allowing me to read secretly after my bedtime, using the dim hallway light to read by, if I needed to. I always needed to. Exiled to my little sister's huge bedroom, I was not heartbroken. There was already 3 beds in there. I took the bed by the window. I loved that I could climb out of the bedroom window onto the long brick balcony, that I could sleep with my window open and feel the wind and the rain on my face. But we argued, my sister and I, argued about everything. She liked to sleep with the door to the hall closed, and the immediate arguments about whether the bedroom door should be open or shut were summarily resolved by my mother, right on a chart that hung on the back of the door, showing the alternate nights were mine or my sister's. Each night, I was content or I was terrified, depending on whether the door was open or closed. The former bedroom at the top of the stairs was let out, and a variety of people passed through it. I viewed them all with suspicion. They were sleeping in my bedroom, using my little yellow wash basin that was just the right size for me. There had been a fat Austrian lady who told us she could leave her head and walk around the ceiling, an architectural student from New Zealand, an American couple whom my mother scandalized, made leave when she discovered they were not actually married. And now there was the opal miner. He was South African. Although he made his money mining opals in Australia, he gave my sister and me an opal each, a rough black rock with blue-green fire red in it. My sister liked him for this and treasured her opal stone. I could not forgive him for the death of my kitten. It was the first day of the spring holidays, 3 weeks of no school. I woke early, thrilled by the prospect of endless days to fill however I wished. I would read, and I would explore. I pulled on my shorts, my t-shirt, my sandals. I went downstairs to the kitchen. My father was cooking while my mother slept in. He was wearing his dressing gown over his pajamas. He often cooked breakfast on Saturdays. I said, "Dad, where's my comic?" He always bought me a copy of Smash before I drove home from work on Fridays, and I would read it on Saturday mornings. In the back of the car, "Do you want toast?" "Yes," I said, "but not burnt." My father did not like toasters. He toasted bread under the grill, and usually he burnt it. I went outside into the drive. I looked around. I went back into the house, pushed the kitchen door open and went in. I liked the kitchen door. It swung both ways, in and out, so servants 60 years ago would be able to walk in or out with their arms laden with dishes or full or empty. "Dad, where's the car?" "In the drive." "No, it isn't." "What?" The telephone rang and my father went out to the hall where the phone was to answer it. I heard him talking to someone. The toast began to smoke under the grill. I got up on the chair and turned the grill off. "That was the police," my father said. "Someone's reported seeing our car abandoned at the bottom of the lane." I said I hadn't even reported it stolen yet. "Right. We can head down now. Meet them there. Toast!" He pulled the pan out from beneath the grill. The toast was smoking and blackened on one side. "Is my comic there? Or did they steal it?" "I don't know. The police didn't mention your comic." My father put peanut butter on the burnt side of each piece of toast, replaced his dressing gown with a coat worn over his pajamas, put on a pair of shoes, and we walked down the lane together. He munched his toast as we walked. I held my toast and did not eat it. He had walked for perhaps 5 minutes down the narrow lane which ran through the fields on each side when a police car came up behind us. It slowed, and the driver greeted my father by name. I hid my piece of burnt toast behind my back while my father talked to the policeman. I wish my family would buy normal sliced white bread, the kind that went into toasters like every other family I knew. My father had found a local baker shop where they made thick loaves of heavy brown bread, and he insisted on buying them. He said they tasted better, which was, to my mind, nonsense. Proper bread was white and pre-sliced and tasted like almost nothing. That was the point. The driver of the police car got out, opened the passenger door, told me to get in. My father rode up front beside the driver. The police car went went down the lane slowly. The whole lane was unpaved back then, just wide enough for one car at a time. A puddly, precipitous, bumpy way, with flints sticking up from it. The whole thing rutted by farm equipment and rain and time. "These kids," said the policeman, "they think it's funny. Steal a car, drive it around, abandon it. They'll be locals." "I'm just glad it was found so fast," said my father. Past Caraway Farm, where a small girl with hair so blonde it was almost white, and red cheeks staring at us as we went past. I held my piece of burnt toast on my lap. "Funny them, leaving it down here, though," said the policeman, because it's a long walk back up to anywhere from here." We passed a bend in the lane and saw the white Mini over on the side, in front of a gate leading into a field, tires sunk deep in the brown mud. We drove past it, parked on the grass verge. The policeman let me out, and the three of us walked over to the Mini, while the policeman told my dad about a crime in this area, and why it was obviously the local kids had done it. Then my dad was opening the passenger side door with his spare key. He said, "Someone left something on the back seat." My father reached back and pulled the blue blanket away that covered the thing in the back seat, even as the policeman was telling him that he shouldn't do that. And I was staring at the back seat because that was where my comic was, so I saw it. It was an it, the thing I was looking at, not a him. Although I was an imaginative child, prone to nightmares, I had persuaded my parents to take me to Madame Tussauds waxworks in London when I was 6, because I wanted to visit the Chamber of Horrors, expecting the movie monster Chamber of Horrors I read about in my comics. I'd wanted to thrill to waxworks of Dracula and Frankenstein's monster and the Wolfman. Instead, I was walked through a seemingly endless sequence of dioramas of unremarkable, glum-looking men and women who had murdered people, usually lodgers and members of their own families, and who were then murdered in their turn by hanging, by the electric chair, in gas chambers. Most of them were depicted with victims in awkward social situations, seated around a dinner table, perhaps, as their poisoned family members expired. The plaques that explained who they were also told me that the majority of them had murdered their families and sold the bodies to anatomy. It was then that the word anatomy garnered its own edge of horror for me. I did not know what anatomy was. I knew only that anatomy made people kill their children. The only thing that kept me from running screaming from the Chamber of Horrors as I was led around is that none of the waxworks had looked fully convincing. They could not truly look dead because they did not ever look alive. The thing in the back seat that had been covered by the blue blanket, I knew that blanket. It was the one that had been given to me from my old bedroom on the shelf for when it got cold. It was not convincing either. It looked a little like the opal miner, but it was dressed in a black suit with a white ruffled shirt and a black bow tie. Its hair was slicked back and artificially shiny. Its eyes were staring. Its lips were bluish, but its skin was very red. It looked like a parody of health. There was no gold chain around its neck. I could see underneath it, crumpled and bent, my copy of Smash with Batman, looking just as he did on the television, on the cover. I don't remember who said what then, just that they made me stand away from the Mini. I crossed the road and I stood there on my own while the policeman talked to my father and wrote things down in a notebook. I stared at the Mini. A length of green garden hose ran from the exhaust pipe up to the driver's window. There was a thick brown mud all over the exhaust, holding the hose pipe in place. Nobody was watching me. I took a bite of my toast. It was burnt and cold. At home, my father ate all the most burnt pieces of toast. "Yum," he said, and "charcoal, good for you," and "burnt toast, my favorite." And he'd eat it all up. When I was much older, he confessed to me that he did not ever like burnt toast, had only eaten it to prevent it from going to waste, and for a fraction of a moment, my entire childhood felt like a lie. It was as if one of the pillars of belief that my world had been built upon had crumbled into dry sand. The policeman spoke into a radio in front of the car. Then he crossed the road and came over to me. "Sorry about this, Sonny," he said. "There's going to be a few more cars coming down this road in a minute. We should find you somewhere to wait that you won't be in the way. Would you like to sit in the back of my car again?" I shook my head. I didn't want to sit there again. Somebody, a girl said, "You can come back with me to the farmhouse. It's no trouble." She was much older than me, at least 11. Her red-brown hair was worn relatively short for a girl, and her nose was snub. She was freckled. She wore a red skirt. Girls didn't wear jeans much back then, not in those parts. She had a soft Sussex accent and sharp gray-blue eyes. She went with the policeman over to my father. She got permission to take me away, and then I was walking down the lane with her. I said, "There's a dead man in our car." "That's why he came down here," she told me. "The end of the road. Nobody's going to find him and stop him around here, 3 o'clock in the morning, and the mud there is wet and easy to mold." "Do you think he killed himself?" "Yes." "Do you like milk?" "Gran's milking Bessie now," I said. "You mean real milk from a cow?" And then felt foolish, but she nodded reassuringly. I thought about this. I'd never had milk that didn't come from a bottle. I think I'd like that. We stopped at a small barn where an old woman, much older than my parents, with long gray hair, like cobwebs, and a thin face, was standing beside a cow. Long black tubes were attached to each of the cow's teats. "We used to milk them by hand," she told me, "but this is easier." She showed me how the milk went from the cow, down the black tubes, into the machine, through a cooler, and into a huge metal churn. The churns were left on a heavy wooden platform outside the barns, where they would be collected each day by a lorry. The old lady gave me a cup of creamy milk from Bessie the cow, the fresh milk before it had gone through the cooler. Nothing I had drunk ever tasted like that before, rich and warm and perfectly happy in my mouth. I remembered that milk after I'd forgotten everything else. "There's more of them up the lane," said the old woman suddenly. "All sorts coming down with lights flashing and all. Such a palaver. We should get the boy into the kitchen. He's hungry, and a cup of milk won't do for a growing boy." The girl said, "Have you eaten?" "Just a piece of toast. It was burned," she said. "My name's Letty Hempstock. This is Hempstock Farm. Come on." She took me in through the front door into the enormous kitchen, sat me down on a huge wooden table, so stained and patterned that it looked as if faces were staring up at me from the old wood. "We have breakfast here early," she said. "Milking starts at first light, but there's porridge in the saucepan and jam to put in it." She gave me a china bowl filled with warm porridge from the stove top, with a lump of homemade blackberry jam, my favorite, in the middle of the porridge. And then she poured cream on it. I swished it around with my spoon before I ate it, swirling it into a purple mess, and was as happy as I've ever been about anything. It tasted perfect. A stocky woman came in. Her red-brown hair was streaked with gray and cut short. She had apple cheeks, a dark green skirt that went to her knees, and Wellington boots. She said, "This must be the boy from the top of the lane. Such a business going on with that car. There will be 5 of them needing tea soon." Letty filled a huge copper kettle from the tap. She lit a gas hob with a match and put the kettle onto the flame. Then she took down 5 chipped mugs from a cupboard and hesitated, looking at the woman. The woman said, "You're right, 6. The doctor will be here too." Then the woman pursed her lips and made a tsh noise. "They've missed the note," she said. "He wrote it so carefully, too, folded it, and put it into his breast pocket, and they haven't looked there yet." "What does it say?" asked Letty. "Read it yourself," said the woman. I thought she was Letty's mother. She seemed like she was somebody's mother. And then she said, "It says that he took all the money that his friends had given him to smuggle out of South Africa, and banked them in England, along with all the money he'd made over the years mining for opals. And he went to the casino in Brighton to gamble, but he only meant to gamble with his own money. And then he only meant to dip into the money his friends had given him until he had made the money back he had lost. And then he didn't have anything, said the woman, and all was dark. That's not what he wrote, though, said Letty, squinting her eyes. What he wrote was, to all my friends, I am sorry it was not like I meant to, and hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me, for I cannot forgive myself. Same thing, said the older woman. She turned to me. I'm Letty's ma, she said. You have met my mother already in the milking shed. I'm Mrs. Hempstock, and she was Mrs. Hempstock before me, so she's old Mrs. Hempstock. This is Hempstock Farm. It's the oldest farm hereabouts. It's in the Domesday Book. I'd wondered why they were called Hempstock, those women, but I did not ask, any more than I dared to ask how they knew about the suicide note, or what the opal miner had thought as he died. They were perfectly matter-of-fact about it. Letty said, I nudged him to look in the breast pocket. He'll think he thought of it himself. There's a good girl, said Mrs. Hempstock. They'll be in here when the kettle boils to ask if I've seen anything unusual, and to have their tea. Why don't you take the boy down to the pond? It's not a pond, said Letty. It's my ocean. She turned to me and said, come on. She led me out of the house the way we'd come in. The day was still gray. We walked around the house, down the cow path. Is it a real ocean? I asked. Oh, yes, she said. We came on it suddenly, a wooden shed, an old bench, and between them a duck pond, dark water spotted with duckweed and lily pads. There was a dead fish, silver as a coin, floating on its side on the surface. That's not good, said Letty. I thought you said it was an ocean, I told her. It's just a pond, really. It is an ocean, she said. We came across it when I was just a baby, from the old country. Letty went into the shed and came out with a long bamboo pole with what looked like a shrimping net on the end. She leaned over, carefully pushing the net beneath the dead fish, and she pulled it out. But Hempstock Farm is in the Domesday Book, I said. Your mum said so, and that was William the Conqueror. Yes, said Letty Hempstock. She took the dead fish out of the net and examined it. It was still soft, not stiff, and it flopped in her hand. I'd never seen so many colors. It was silver, yes, but beneath the silver was blue and green and purple, and each scale was tipped with black. What kind of fish is it? I asked. This is very odd, she said. I mean, mostly fish in this ocean don't die anyway. She produced a horn-handled pocket knife, although I could not have told you from where, and she pushed it into the stomach of the fish and sliced along toward the tail. This is what killed her, said Letty. She took something from inside the fish. Then she put it, still greasy from the fish guts, into my hand. I bent down, dipped it into the water, rubbing my fingers across it to clean it off. I stared at it. Queen Victoria's face stared back at me. 6pence, I said. The fish ate a 6pence? It's not good, is it? Said Letty Hempstock. There was a little sunshine now. It showed the freckles that clustered across her cheeks and nose. And where the sunlight touched her hair, it was coppery red. And then she said, Your father's wondering where you are. Time to be getting back. I tried to give her the little silver 6pence, but she shook her head. Keep it, she said. You can buy chocolates or sherbet lemons. I don't think I can, I said. It's too small. I don't know if shops will take 6pences like these nowadays. Then put it in your piggy bank, she said. It might bring you luck. She said this doubtfully, as if she were uncertain what kind of luck it would bring. The policeman and my father and 2 men in brown suits and ties were standing in the farmhouse kitchen. One of the men told he was a policeman, but he wasn't wearing a uniform, which I thought was disappointing. If I were a policeman, I was certain I would wear my uniform wherever I could. The other man with a suit and tie and I recognized as Dr. Smithson, our family doctor. They were finishing their tea. My father thanked Mrs. Hempstock and Letty for taking care of me, and they said I was no trouble at all, and that I could come again. The policeman who had driven us down to the Mini now drove us back to our house and dropped us off at the end of the drive. Probably best if you don't talk about this to your sister, said my father. I didn't want to talk about it to anybody. I had found a special place and made a new friend, and lost my comic, and I was holding an old-fashioned silver sixpence tightly in my hand. I said, "What makes the ocean different to the sea?" "Bigger," said my father. "An ocean is much bigger than the sea." "Why?" "Just thinking," I said. "Could you have an ocean that was as small as a pond?" "No," said my father. "Ponds are pond size, lakes are lake size, seas are seas, and oceans are oceans. Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Arctic. I think that's all the oceans there are." My father went up to his bedroom to talk to my mom and to be on the phone up there. I dropped the silver sixpence into my piggy bank. It was a kind of china piggy bank from which nothing could be removed. One day, when it could hold no more coins, I would be allowed to break it. But it was far from full. Chapter 3. I never saw the white Mini again. 2 days later, on Monday, my father took delivery of a black Rover with cracked and red leather seats. It was a bigger car than the Mini had been, but not as comfortable. The smell of old cigars permeated the leather upholstery, and long drives in the back of the Rover always left us feeling carsick. The black Rover was not the only thing to arrive on Monday morning. I also received a letter. I was 7 years old, and I never got letters. I got cards on my birthday from my grandparents, and from Ellen Henderson, my mother's friend, whom I did not know. On my birthday, Ellen Henderson, who lived in a camper van, would send me a handkerchief. I did not get letters. Even so, I would check the post every day to see if there was anything for me. And that morning, there was. I opened it, did not understand what I was looking at, and took it to my mother. "You've won the premium bond," she said. "What does that mean?" "When you were born, when all of her grandchildren were born, your grandma bought you a premium bond. And when the number gets chosen, you can win thousands of pounds." Did I win thousands of pounds? No. She looked at the slip of paper. "You've won 25 pounds. I was sad not to have won thousands of pounds. I already knew what I would buy with it. I would buy a place to go and be alone, like a bat cave with a hidden entrance. But I was delighted to be in possession of a fortune beyond my previous imaginings. 25 pounds. I could buy 4 little blackjack or fruit salad sweets for a penny. They were a farthing each, although there were no more farthings. 25 pounds at 240 pennies to the pound, and 4 sweets to a penny was more sweets than I could easily imagine. "I'll put it in your post office account," said my mother, crushing my dreams. I did not have any more sweets than I had had that morning. Even so, I was rich, 25 pounds richer than I had been moments before. I had never won anything, ever. I made her show me the piece of paper with my name on it again before she put it into her handbag. That was Monday morning. In the afternoon, the ancient Mr. Woolery, who came in on Monday and Thursday afternoons to do some gardening, Mrs. Woolery, his equally ancient wife, who wore galoshes, huge semi-transparent overshoes, would come in on Wednesday afternoons and clean, was digging in the vegetable garden and dug up a bottle filled with pennies and half-pennies, and a 3-penny bits, and even farthings. None of the coins was dated later than 1937, and I spent the afternoon polishing them with brown sauce and vinegar to make them shine. My mother put the bottle of old coins on the mantelpiece of the dining room, and said that she expected that a coin collector might pay several pounds for them. I went to bed that night happy and excited. I was rich. Buried treasure had been discovered. The world was a good place. I don't remember how the dream started, but that's the way of dreams, isn't it? I know that I was in school and having a bad day, hiding from the kinds of kids who hit me and called me names. But they found me anyway, deep in the rhododendron thicket behind the school. I knew it must be a dream, but in a dream I didn't know this. It was real, and it was true, because my grandfather was with them and his friends, old men with gray skin and hacking coughs. They held sharp pencils, the kind that drew blood when you were jabbed with them. I ran from them, but they were faster than I was. The old man and the big boys, and in the boys' toilet, where I was hidden in a cubicle, they caught up with me. They held me down and forced open my mouth wide. My grandfather, but it was not my grandfather. It was really a waxwork of my grandfather, intent on selling me to anatomy, held something sharp and glittering, and began pushing it into my mouth with his stubby fingers. It was hard and sharp and familiar, and it made me gag and choke. My mouth filled with a metallic taste. They were looking at me with mean, triumphant eyes, all the people in the boys' toilets, and I tried not to choke on the thing in my throat, determined not to give them that satisfaction. I woke, and I was choking. I could not breathe. There was something in my throat, hard and sharp, and stopping me from breathing or from crying out. I began to cough as I woke, tears streaming down my cheeks, nose running. I pushed my fingers as deep as I could into my own mouth, desperate and panicked and determined. With the tip of my forefinger, I felt the edge of something hard. I put the middle finger on the other side of it, choking myself, clamping the thing between them, and I pulled out whatever was in my throat. I gasped for breath, and then I half vomited into my bedsheets, threw up a clear drool flecked with blood from where the thing had cut my throat as I had pulled it out. I did not look at the thing. It was tight in my hands, slimy with my saliva and my phlegm. Did not want to look at it. I did not want it to exist, the bridge between my dream and the waking world. I ran down the hallway to the bathroom, down at the far end of the house. I washed my mouth out, drank directly from the cold tap, spat red into the white sink. Only when I'd done that did I sit on the side of the white bathtub and open my hand. I was scared. But what was in my hand, what had been in my throat, wasn't scary. It was only a coin, a silver shilling. I went back to the bedroom. I dressed myself, cleaned the vomit from my sheets as best I could with a damp face flannel. I hoped that the sheets would dry before I had to sleep in the bed that night. And then I went downstairs. I wanted to tell someone about the shilling, but I did not know who to tell. I knew enough about adults to know that if I did tell them what had happened, I would not be believed. Adults rarely seemed to believe me when I told them the truth anyway. Why would they believe me about something so unlikely? My sister was playing in the back garden with some of her friends. She ran over to me angrily when she saw me. She said, "I hate you. I'm telling Mommy and Daddy when they come home." "What?" "You know," she said. "I know it was you." "What was me?" "Throwing coins at me. At all of us, from the bushes. That was just nasty." "But I didn't. It hurt." She went back to her friends, and they all glared at me. My throat felt painful and ragged. I walked down the drive. I don't know where I was thinking of going. I just didn't want to be there any longer. Letty Hempstock was standing at the bottom of the drive beneath the chestnut trees. She looked as if she'd been waiting for 100 years and could wait for another 100. She wore a white dress, but the light coming through the chestnut's young spring leaves stained it green. I said, "Hello." She said, "You were having bad dreams, weren't you?" I took the shilling out of my pocket and showed it to her. "I was choking on it," I told her, "when I woke up, but I don't know how it got into my mouth. If someone had put it into my mouth, I would have woken up. It was just in there when I woke." "Yes," she said. "My sister says I threw coins at them from the bushes, but I didn't." "No," she agreed, "you didn't." I said, "Letty, what's happening?" "Oh," she said, as if it was obvious. "Someone's just trying to give people money. That's all. But it's doing it very badly. It's stirring things up around here that should be asleep, and that's not good." Is it something to do with the man who died? Something to do with him, yes. Is he doing this? She shook her head. Then she said, Have you had breakfast? I shook my head. Well then, she said, come on. We walked down the lane together. There were 4 houses down the lane, here and there, back and then. And she pointed to them as we went past. In that house, said Letty Hempstock, a man dreamed of being sold and of being turned into money. Now he's starting to see things in mirrors. What kinds of things? Himself, but with fingers poking out of his eye sockets and things coming out of his mouth, like crab claws. I thought about people with crab legs coming out of their mouths in mirrors. Why did I find a shilling in my throat? He wanted people to have money. The opal miner who died in the car? Yes, sort of. Not exactly. He started this all off, like someone lighting a fuse and a firework. His death lit the touch paper, the thing that's exploding right now. That isn't him. That's somebody else. Something else. She rubbed her freckled nose with a grubby hand. A lady's gone mad in that house, she told me, and it would not have occurred to me to doubt her. She has money in the mattress. Now she won't get out of bed in case someone takes it from her. How do you know? She shrugged. Once you've been around for a bit, you get to know stuff. I kicked a stone. By a bit, do you mean a really long time? She nodded. How old are you really? I asked. 11. I thought for a bit. Then I asked, how long have you been 11 for? She smiled at me. We walked past Caraway Farm, the farmers whom one day would come to know as Callie Anders' parents, were standing in their farmyard shouting at each other. They stopped when they saw us. When we rounded a bend in the lane and were out of their sight, Letty said, those poor people. Why are they poor people? Because they've been having money problems. And this morning he had a dream where she was doing bad things to earn money. So he looked in her handbag and found lots of folded up 10-shilling notes. She says she doesn't know where they came from, and he doesn't believe her. He doesn't know what to believe. All the fighting and the dreams, it's about money, isn't it? I'm not sure, said Letty. And she seemed to grow up then, that I was almost scared of her. Whatever's happening, she said eventually, it can all be sorted out. She saw the expression on my face then, worried, scared even, and she said, after pancakes. Letty cooked us pancakes on a big metal griddle on the kitchen stove. They were paper thin, and as each pancake was done, Letty would squeeze lemon onto it and plop a blob of plum jam into the center and roll it tightly like a cigar. When there were enough, we sat at the kitchen table and wolfed them down. There was a hearth in the kitchen, and there were ashes still smoldering in the hearth from the night before. That kitchen was a friendly place, I thought. I said to Letty, I'm scared. She smiled at me. I'll make sure you're safe, I promise. I'm not scared. I was still scared, but not as much. It's just scary. I said I promise, said Letty Hempstock. I won't let you get hurt. Hurt, said a high, cracked voice. Who's hurt? What's been hurt? Why would anybody be hurt? It was old Mrs. Hempstock, her apron held between her hands, and in the hollow of the apron so many daffodils that light reflected up from them, transforming her face to gold, and the kitchen seemed bathed in yellow light. Letty said, something's causing trouble. It's giving people money, in their dreams and in real life. She showed the old lady my shilling. My friend found himself choking on this shilling when he woke up this morning. Old Mrs. Hempstock put her apron on the kitchen table, rapidly moving the daffodils off the cloth and onto the wood. Then she took the shilling from Letty. She squinted at it, sniffed it, rubbed at it, listened to it, or put it to her ear at any rate, then touched it with the tip of her purple tongue. It's new, she said at last. It says 1912 on it, but it didn't exist yesterday. Letty said, I knew there was something funny about it. I looked up at old Mrs. Hempstock. How do you know? Good question, lovey. It's electron decay mostly. You have to look at things closely to see the electrons. They're the little dinky ones that look like tiny smiles, The neutrons are gray ones that look like frowns. Electrons were all a bit too smiley for 1912, so then I checked the sides of the letters and the old king's head, and everything was a tad too crisp and sharp. Even where they are worn, it was as if they'd been made to be worn. You must have very good eyesight, I told her. I was impressed. She gave me back the coin. Not as good as it once was, but then, when you get to be my age, your eyesight won't be as sharp as it once was either. And she let out a guffaw, as if she had said something very funny. How old is that? Letty looked at me, and I was worried that I'd said something rude. Sometimes adults didn't like to be asked their ages, and sometimes they did. In my experience, old people did. They were proud of their ages. Mrs. Woolery was 77, and Mr. Woolery was 89, and they liked telling us how old they were. Old Mrs. Hempstock went over to the cupboard and took down several colorful vases. Old enough, she said. I remember when the moon was made. Hasn't there always been a moon? Bless you. Not in the slightest. I remember the day the moon came. We looked up into the sky, and it was all dirty brown and sooty gray. Here, then, not green and blue. She half filled each of the vases at the sink, then took a pair of blackened kitchen scissors and snipped off the bottom half-inch of the stem from each of the daffodils. I said, Are you sure it's not the man's ghost doing this? Are you sure we aren't being haunted? They both laughed then, the girl and the old woman, and I felt stupid. I said, Sorry. Ghosts can't make things, said Letty. They aren't even good at moving things. Old Mrs. Hempstock said, Go and get your mother. She's doing laundry. Then to me, You shall help me with the daffs. I helped her put the flowers into the vases and asked my opinion on where to put the vases in the kitchen. We placed the vases where I suggested, and I felt wonderfully important. The daffodils sat like patches of sunlight, making the dark wooden kitchen even more cheerful. The floor was made of red and gray flagstones. The walls were whitewashed. The old woman gave me a lump of honeycomb from the Hempstock's own beehive on a chipped saucer and poured a little cream over it from a jug. I ate it with a spoon, chewing the wax like gum, letting the honey flow into my mouth, sweet and sticky, with the aftertaste of wildflowers. I was scraping the last of the cream and honey from the saucer when Letty and her mother came into the kitchen. Mrs. Hempstock still had the big Wellington boots on, and she strode in as if she were in an enormous hurry. Mother, she said, giving the boy honey, you'll rot his teeth. Old Mrs. Hempstock shrugged. I'll have a word with the wigglers in his mouth, she said. Get them to leave his teeth alone. You can't just boss bacteria around like that, said the younger Mrs. Hempstock. They don't like it. Stuff and silliness, said the old lady. You leave wigglers alone, and they'll be carrying on like anything. Show them who's boss, and they can't do enough for you. You've tasted my cheese, she turned to me. I've won medals for my cheese. Medals. Back in the old king's day, there were those who'd ride for a week to buy a round of my cheese. They said that the king himself had it, with his bread and his boys, Prince Dickon and Prince Geoffrey, and even Prince John. They swore it was the finest cheese they had ever tasted. Gran, said Letty, and the old woman stopped mid-flow. Letty's mother said, You will be needing a hazel wand, and, she added, somewhat doubtful, I suppose you could take the lad and his coin. It'll be easy to carry if he's with you. Something she made. She, said Letty. She was holding her horn-handled penknife with the blade closed. Tastes like a she, said Letty's mother. I might be wrong, mind. Don't take the boy, said old Mrs. Hempstock. Asking for trouble, that is. I was disappointed. We'll be fine, said Letty. I'll take care of him and me. It'll be an adventure. And he'll be my company. Please, Gran? I looked up at old Mrs. Hempstock with hope on my face and waited. Don't say I didn't warn you. If it all goes wobbly, said old Mrs. Hempstock. Thank you, Gran. I won't, and I'll be careful. Old Mrs. Hempstock sniffed. Now, don't do anything stupid. Approach it with care. Bind it. close its ways, send it back to sleep. I know, said Letty. I know all that. Honestly, we'll be fine. That's what she said, but we weren't. I'll be reading chapter 4 through 7 some other time. I'll let you guys know. Thanks for joining me today. Have a wonderful day.